There's nothing worse than being handed a child that's not breathing, that's just been pulled out of a swimming pool. And you just click in, you go to work, you do what you've been trained to do, you follow your procedures, get things done, and then it's time to settle down and let the emotional component kick in. Because if the emotional component affects you during the emergency, you're less likely to be able to do your job. So we learn how to keep it in check.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniforms. We are here on location in, where are we? Jupiter, Florida?
Jupiter, Florida.
Where the humidity, the relative humidity is 4,000%. It's spectacular. I feel like I'm being waterboarded out here. Why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Oh, hi, I'm Houston Park. I'm a retired Special Operations Captain from Palm Beach County, Florida. I just finished with about 31 years in service, and am connected to ASR as a medical consultant and to help understand things that may be going on during an active shooting environment.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about you. Give me some context on your background.
Well, like I said, I've been in the fire service for 31 years. Prior to that, I was an ocean lifeguard down in Miami, one of the best jobs in the world. But I worked in the fire service, and my responsibilities to include EMS were special operations. And so hazardous materials response, building collapse, scuba diving, anything with significant entrapment in a vehicle. We supported the EOD team, and anything out of the ordinary we would respond to. So that was my primary goal and responsibility, but I've always said that all of that's just a really cool way to do EMS, emergency medical services. So if we have all this training and it's great and we can get in and we can breach walls and we can do whatever we need to, really why we're doing that is so that we can get to somebody that needs help and treat them. So that's really what I think special operations is.
Awesome. So guys, if you've never seen the show before, the way that we roll is this. We invite guests on, active or retired emergency responders, veterans, and we ask them to tell you about a good day and about a bad day. So where do you want to start, brother? Good day or bad day?
Well, I'd like to start on a bad day so I finish on a good note.
I like that.
But I just want to say that in South Florida, the fire service is predominantly emergency medical service driven. So yes, we fight fires and we do all the cool stuff, but really what we do is we're all paramedics. So we function in two roles. And I would have to say that off the top of my head, probably one of the worst days I've ever come across was just a horrific murder scene where a foster parent brutally tortured and killed a child, and her brother, or tried to kill her brother and wasn't successful. So we were dealing with the brother who was seriously injured. We were dealing with a traumatic death on scene. And we were also dealing with the foster parent who tried to take his own life at the same time. So that was a really bad day. Many of the firefighters I work with, because it was such a complex environment, we were on scene for a couple of days, and we had assistance from the FBI and local and state and other federal agencies because of the complexity. But many of them said to me afterwards that was probably the decision to finish their career early or go into retirement because it was so bad. And it's just part of the job. We don't pick what kind of an emergency call we go to. When we get notified, we go. So that's tough, and we have coping mechanisms and we learn how to deal with it. But it is unfortunately part of the real world of fire service and EMS.
You know, if you look at, we see this all the time in the media right now, where it's sort of the Monday morning quarterbacking, right? I have to imagine that happens with you guys too, and doesn't make it any easier to be able to move on and process that. What are some of these coping mechanisms?
Well, there are many different coping mechanisms. Everybody comes up with their own way to deal with it. We have a structured critical incident stress management team that helps us understand some of the emotions that we're feeling and how to even assimilate back into your family when you go home. Because there's triggers, there's things that are going to make you remember It could just be a sensation such as a smell or a taste or a cool breeze going by, and it's going to trigger those memories exactly as they occurred. And so we encourage now that people talk about it instead of keeping it inside, to maintain a healthy lifestyle, be involved in athletics, but really to address it and talk about it, because I always like to make the analogy that you can only pour so much water in a cup before it overfills. Sure. And that overfilling is those feelings that we bottle up inside us over and over, and they'll have an impact on you at some point.
No doubt.
Ironically, just before I came here, I was talking to a co-retired firefighter, and he was talking about all of his injuries that now have surfaced as a result of doing his career for 30 years, and I have the same thing. And then I said, yeah, but don't forget about the psychological impact, because there's nothing worse than being handed a child that's not breathing, that's just been pulled out of a swimming pool. And you just click in, you go to work, you do what you've been trained to do, you follow your procedures, get things done, and then it's time to settle down and let the emotional component kick in. Because if the emotional component affects you during the emergency, you're less likely to be able to do your job. So we learn how to keep it in check.
Awesome.
So that's a challenge, but it's good.
Talk to me about a good day.
Well, I've had so many good days and bad days, but towards the end of my career, I'm going to tag in a bad day that went to a good day, or a good end of a career, I should say. But we have a severe opioid epidemic here in South Florida, like the nation has. And so it was New Year's Day, and we responded to a person in cardiac arrest. And there we found a young man, in cardiac arrest outside of a trailer at the bottom of a U.S. flagpole. And we tried to revive him with no success. And it turns out that he was a U.S. soldier that had returned from theater. And because of his injuries, he had become addicted to painkillers. And then when his painkillers were no longer available, he switched to heroin. And so when we found him, he was deceased, unfortunately. And I was used to running overdoses, and I was used to running people that didn't make it. But that bothered me that we have a soldier that's come back, and now they're addicted and there's no help. So that was a very tragic morning. But it was a catalyst to push me forward and go after some things that I've made some tremendous changes in, which I think attribute to probably the most rewarding success I've had in my entire fire service. We've gone after treating patients that are addicted to opioids, and we get them immediate counseling, and we get them directly involved with the hospital, and we developed a whole program, and we have statistics that are 62% higher than anything else in the nation as far as successes on keeping people from overdosing.
That's incredible.
So when you take a young person in their young 20s and you can change their direction through medical assisted treatment and through counseling and through continuous support to where they clean up and they're no longer homeless standing on the side of the road begging for money, they're being productive in society. And so that is, to me, is probably the most rewarding part of my career.
How does it feel to really save a life? And I'm not just talking in the few moments after. I'm talking looking back on your career, knowing that people are here today that wouldn't have been here otherwise.
It's a great feeling to save a life, and there's so many different ways that we do that. But what is pretty common within the first responder community is they typically live close to where they work. When you're in the grocery store and you recognize somebody and you can think to yourself, wow, I was part of a team that helped save that person and they wouldn't be here otherwise. Awesome. Or they come up and they thank you. Not that they remember, or maybe they do, but usually somebody would say, hey, that's the fire service guys that helped you. And so that's extremely rewarding when you do that. And it's there's highs that come with that. I mean, you get these great feelings of just endorphin flush and you feel super, and then there's days where all of that just gets scrubbed away and you go back to feeling and remembering those that you weren't able to save. We can't save everybody, but we definitely try.
No doubt. Guys, the entire point of this show is to showcase and humanize the men and women behind the uniforms. And so I'm so appreciative, brother, that you came on.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you for taking the 2 seconds it's going to take you to hit the share button on this video. Getting these stories out there is the only way that we begin to really turn this narrative. So, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. God bless America.